Welcome back to Indiana Diecast Racing and the continuing action of the Final Fantasy Fracas. For over an epic year and a half, 374 cars have competed in this marathon event, and today we'll see the final four battle it out over the course of 8 laps to determine the champion. Here are the finalists. Headlining the group with his tournament-leading purple bubble gunner, it's Numskull of Numskull Racing. He's accrued 89 points in this 98-gram beast, winning an amazing 15 out of 28 laps driven. This is the fan favorite to win based on the poll. Numskull's also represented by a second vehicle today, this one a Sir Ominous weighing 96 grams. This black and red Hulk has won 9 laps over the course of the tournament, earning 84 points. The number 3 seed is Motor Toms from the venerable Arlo Racing. MT's Lethal Diesel weighs 91 grams, winning 12 laps and achieving 81 points. And lastly, the plucky underdog from Filipiak Performance Diecast in his group high 103-gram street shaker that won't die, it's Deuce. Now sit back and relax as we review how each driver made it here in typical IDR style. In round 1, Numskull's Bubble Gunner went up against Amber Beach Stevie Jock and Grey Wizard, getting caught up in Amber's DNF on lap 1. He'd fight off Amber in Echo Base and take the win on lap 2, narrowly beat her to the finish line on lap 3, then wreck in turn 5 on lap 4, barely advancing in second place with 8 points. Numskull's Sir Ominous raced with Crystal ZD, Astro, and Lazy A, taking second behind Crystal on the opening lap. He'd chase her around the square for second again on lap 2, and only managed third, again behind Crystal on lap 3. Starting from the pole on lap 4, he'd take the win, also advancing in second place, but with 12 points. In the first round, Motor Toms battled Rocket, Mark, and Indy Rain in a Lethal Diesel off, only managing third on lap 1. He would similarly place third on lap 2, but on lap 3 he would take off from the pole and win uncontested. Yay, ludicrous speed. And on lap 4, they'd all get tangled up after Mark wrecked, and only Motor Toms would complete the lap, sealing the group victory with 12 points. Deuce took on Crazy Canuck, Stacy Peralta, and Skinny Pete in what was the closest group in the first round. He'd clipped Poe Dameron's X-Wing on lap 1 and take an early DNF. He'd be the only driver to finish lap 2, then wiped out exiting Echo Base on lap 3, only to run away with lap 4, going from eliminated to group victor with 1 point separating top from bottom. In round 2, Numskull's Bubble Gunner took on Monkey G, Monkey Do, Lone Star, and Sephiroth. He'd only managed third on the opening lap, but on lap 2, he'd take advantage of Sephiroth's wreck to win, and then there was no looking back. He'd win easily from the pole on lap 3, completing the turkey on lap 4 from the outside lane. His Sir Ominous raced Cyrano, Buckminster, West Cozen, and Maisie. He'd take lap 1 after a solid crossover move, finish second behind Buckminster on lap 2, challenge Maisie but only manage second on lap 3, and then bookend his victories by winning from the pole on lap 4 to handily win the group. Motor Tom's round 2 group consisted of Slingshot, Numskull's Blue Bubble Gunner, and Grey Wizard. He too would take the opening lap after a strong crossover. Lap 2 would be his worst, finishing third after getting stuck behind Slingshot. Toms would then finish second behind Grey Wizard's Lakester, and closing out the group with a win from the pole, topping Numskull by 3. In the round of the same name, Deuce met up with Hutch, Master Splinter, and the Breanimal, winning the first lap after savagely punting Splinter off the track. Karma would see him DNF after getting out front on lap 2. Another lap victory on lap 3. And a Hoth-based DNF on lap 4, again advancing despite only scoring 8 points. In round 3, Numskull's Bubble Gunner would avoid the Oops All Numskulls group, instead facing Grey Wizard, Grogu, and Hutch. He'd push Hutch across the line and take second to open competition, win from the pole as all these top cars seem to have done consistently, went back-to-back on lap 3 to clinch his spot in round 4, following up with the bronze on lap 4. His Sir Ominous also missed the All-Numskull group, instead racing with Skeeter, Dangerous Dawn, and Tyler. Numskull would take the W on the first 2 laps from the front row, which would prove to be pivotal as he'd only finished third on laps 3 and 4, winning the group 1 point ahead of Skeeter and Tyler. Motor Toms would enjoy a few laps against Numskull, Rocket, and Michael Motorcycle, slide blocking his way to an opening lap victory. He'd follow it up in last after struggling mightily on lap 2, claims second behind M3 on lap 3, bringing it full circle and running away with the final lap to best Numskull by a point. Deuce would have his best performance yet in round 3, ironically against FPD teammates Jack, Crow, Brutal, and Thomas. He'd have to settle for second behind Jack on lap 1, but he'd win convincingly on lap 2 despite some looseness on the final straight. He'd win again on lap 3 after taking advantage of the crossover, only to DNF and still win the group on lap 4 after avoiding a wreck in Echo Base. After surviving the round of death, the Bubble Gunner met up with Rumble, Raggedy Man, and tournament fan favorite Louisa. Numskull would be runner-up to Rumble on lap 1, beat out Rumble for the win on lap 2, and on lap 3 starting on the outside would really have to scrap and block to get ahead of Louisa and Rumble, again taking the win. On lap 4 he'd only manage 4th, but it would be enough to place second behind Rumble in the group. In Numskull's other vehicle, he'd run against Smooth Keith Stone, Sneaky Bob, and Cassie and the Cassie and Maddie duo. He'd have to settle for second on lap 1. He'd follow Keith down the track for second on lap 2, get stuck behind the girls and only place 4th on lap 3. Finally pulling out the win on a double DNF lap 4 to leap past Sneaky Bob for second in the group. Motor Toms would have his strongest result against Bree Nanner, Grey Wizard, and Baby Richie, fighting hard for second on lap 1. He'd run away with the group win on lap 2, and then win lap 3 from the front outside, finally pushing Richie down the track to close out the day with another second place finish to win the group. Deuce would again have a low scoring performance, this time against Tony Alva, Cookie Monster, and Numskull's Red Bubble Gunner. He'd wreck again entering Echo Base, then Numskull would take him out on lap 2 just before the finish line. He'd have a strong second half while starting on the front row, winning lap 3 with a triple DNF behind him, finally leading the group to the finish on lap 4, narrowly beating out Cookie Monster. In the somewhat recent quarterfinals, Numskull's Bubble Gunner and Deuce met up for the first time, with Smooth Keith Stone and Crystal Zeddy again appearing in our recap. Numskull and Deuce would finish second and third after Deuce powered his way around Crystal on the final straight. They'd go 1 and 2 on lap 2 after a strong start on the inside lane. On lap 3 they'd trade spots, but again lead the group to the line, repeating this result on lap 4 to convincingly tie for the group win. The Sir Ominous took on Flip, Ryan, and Baby Richie, claiming second on lap 1 after getting ahead of Ryan and entering Echo Base. He'd place second on lap 2 with a similar move again to get ahead of Ryan. On lap 3, he'd get tangled up with Richie and Flip, only finishing third. But on lap 4, he'd run away with it, securing the group win when Flip floundered in the second half. That's hard to say. Motor Toms would get to face Numbskull's Red Bubble Gunner as well as Googly G and Bay City Daryl. He'd take the opening lap from the front outside after beating Numbskull out of turn 2. He'd only managed third on lap 2, and again on lap 3, the latter getting hung up behind other traffic. He'd turn in another lap victory on lap 4 to tie Googly G for the win. In the semis, Numbskull's Bubble Gunner and Motor Toms were paired up with Flip and Googly G. They'd take the opening lap due to a double DNF, take first and third on lap 2 while Toms pushed Googly G across the line. They would again dominate lap 3, running on the outside crossover. Lap 4 would be mediocre for Toms while Numbskull continued a streak of top 2 finishes. Numbskull would take lap 5 with Toms finishing third. On lap 6, Numbskull would win from the front outside while Toms would fall further behind with a last place finish. They'd repeat these results on lap 7 and Motor Toms would be looking at a 3-point deficit behind Googly G for second going into the final lap. And this is where Motor Tom's luck would change, winning the final lap while Googly G DNF'd himself right out of the tournament. In the other semifinal, Numbskull's Sir Ominous and Deuce raced Rumble and Numbskull's Blue Bubble Gunner, and they'd both have a poor start, taking third and fourth on the opening lap. Ominous would win lap 2, while Deuce only managed third. Deuce would fend off both Numbskulls for the win on lap 3, following that up with back-to-back W's to become the top seed entering the second half, while Sir Ominous got around his teammate to become number 2. From there, the pair would pretty much never look back, with both drivers going 1 and 2 on every remaining lap except when Deuce DNF'd and Echo Base on lap 7. They would tie for the group victory 5 points ahead of the Blue Bubble Gunner. And at long last, today's racing is finally here, arranged in order by cumulative point totals. We've got Numbskull, Motor Toms, and Deuce. They're off, and Numbskull's Bubble Gunner gets a big jump out of the gate, and Motor Toms quickly falls to the back. The Purple Bubble Gunner is the fan favorite to take the gold today. The Numbskull tag team leads, Deuce is third, and Motor Tom's in the back. Deuce drops back following a slide in turn 5, and lap 1 goes to Numbskull and his Purple Bubble Gunner, who wins from the pole. Since this is the finals, I'm going to do something I typically loathe, and that's replay every second of these final 8 laps. Numbskull's Bubble Gunner has a spectacular jump out of the gate, and his Sir Ominous is quick to slot into second, as Motor Tom's motor seems to have been hampered by a speed limiter, kind of like a real Humvee. Deuce stays right with the Sir Ominous, but never really gets a chance to make a pass, and when he drifts through turn 5, he loses so much speed that there's no way he's going to catch Numbskull again. The Bubble Gunner takes it to the house on a lap neither Numbskull makes any mistakes. If Numbskull were in Top Gun, I guess he'd probably play Iceman. They rotate around with Toms and Numbskull up front, Deuce and Numbskull in the back. Toms and Deuce quick around the turn, but the Bubble Gunner turns on the jets. Numbskull leads for the second time today, and his Sir Ominous is making moves in the back. Deuce has fallen back while the Numbskull sandwich plows through the Savage Square. The Bubble Gunner breaks away and will put up back-to-back wins to open competition. Motor Tom's with a solid second place to come back from his first lap flop. Another solid start for Numbskull, this time on the outside crossover lane. He makes the double pass as they hit turn 2, and once again, he leads the group to the house. His Sir Ominous passes Deuce on the way to Echo Base, then gets stymied trying to find a gap to pass Motor Toms. Toms gets briefly sideways, and that allows the Bubble Gunner to pull away and win largely uncontested. So after 2, Numbskull's Bubble Gunner leads with 8, his Sir Ominous has 5, Motor Toms 4, and Deuce the underdog with 3. Deuce assumes the pole for lap 3 with Motor Toms on the outside. Deuce and Sir Ominous with a good start on the inside. Motor Toms is not going to catch him. Deuce leads for the first time today, followed by Numbskull's Sir Ominous. Toms and the Bubble Gunner jockey for third in the back. Ominous nearly gets past Deuce. They come down the final straight, they get connected, and Deuce hangs on to win, and the Bubble Gunner gets past Motor Toms for third. A little bit more to unpack this time as Deuce has a change in fortune, but Motor Toms with his third finish in the bottom 2. Everybody pretty even on the back straight this time, and that allows Deuce to command the group through Hoth and into the Savage Square. I think Numbskull's Ominous was just camera shy, because as soon as we look away, he goes on the attack, nearly making the pass on the outside of turn 6. Deuce loses grip and throws the 360 on the final straight, narrowly avoiding the choke at the line, while Motor Toms does exactly that, allowing the points leader to take advantage. The Purple Bubble Gunner stays on top, but his lead shrinks to 2 over his teammate. Deuce closes the gap a bit, while Motor Toms turns in his second 4th place finish. Deuce with a solid start on the outside, and he's going to overtake both Numbskull drivers as they round turn 2. Deuce rides the wall, but miraculously recovers, and I think with some help from Numbskull. It's another 3-car battle up front. Motor Toms nowhere to be seen. Lap 4 is Deuce, Sir Ominous, Bubble Gunner, and Motor Toms rolls himself off the wall on the final straight and will earn today's first DNF. Motor Toms can't really be blamed for spinning the tires, as the P4 position is known for inducing that in nearly everyone. Deuce really flashing some speed, overtaking the tandem pair of Numbskullers. He's got me wondering if he's got a chance here. Deuce nearly wipes out trying to avoid a Wampa, and he must have used the force or something to stabilize his car in Echo Base while maintaining the lead. He does get a tad loose entering the square, but stays fast enough to rack up back-to-back wins. We reached the halfway point, and it almost couldn't be closer between the 2 Numbskulls and Deuce. And now they will reset the starting order based on current points. Since Deuce has more wins than Sir Ominous, Deuce moves up to the number 2 position, pun intended. Bubble Gunner out front, but Deuce is challenging. Around turn 2, and Deuce completes the pass. Can he win 3 in a row? They're through Echo Base, both Numbskulls all over Deuce like flies on a turd. They round the final turn, and it's Deuce, Bubble Gunner, Sir Ominous, and here comes Motor Toms, who nearly wipes out again, but manages to roll across the line for what may be a very crucial point for him. I think the months and months of grinding have finally caught up with Motor Toms, who, despite his best efforts, doesn't seem to be able to keep up with the other 3 vehicles. It's the curse. Deuce, however, is really coming into his prime, assuming he can avoid his particular trouble spot entering Echo Base. But it's looking more and more like if he can just get out front, nobody can challenge him. Only 3 laps to go in the fracas, and we've got a tie at the top between Numbskull's Bubble Gunner and Deuce of FPD. All the wins split evenly between the pair so far. It's an all-Numbskull front row for lap 6. Bubble Gunner easily overtakes Sir Ominous, and Deuce follows through turn 2. Deuce spins and knocks Sir Ominous back. Bubble Gunner wins and breaks the streak held by Deuce. Sir Ominous, a little loose on the final straight, beats out Motor Toms for third. Another solid start by the Numbskullers, and despite Deuce's relatively slow start, he's able to get it in gear and catch the pair by turn 2. This has really devolved into a 3-car battle, and though I hate to say it, I think Sir Ominous is really only racing for 3rd place, as Bubble Gunner and Deuce have literally taken every single lap. Motor Toms has unfortunately been mathematically eliminated, while the top 3 are only separated by 4 with 2 to go. Toms will make his final pole position start here on lap 7. While this has to be a gut-wrenching finale for Arlo Racing, simply making it here is absolutely amazing, as the odds were as long as they get here in Diecast Racing, even for such a great builder and prominent name in the sport. Toms looking the best he has all day. It's Ominous, Motor Toms, Deuce, and Bubble Gunner. And that was probably the fastest lap for all 4 cars to finish collectively. Everyone with a strong start to lap 7, and Sir Ominous really building some speed on the back straight. They were all rolling well this time, and I wonder if Deuce's weight distribution is more rear focused, as we've seen his front end slide around quite a bit today. And that's the first lap of the day, not won by Deuce or Numbskull's Bubble Gunner. We're down to the final trip around the horn to decide the champion, and the top 3 drivers are all within a single point. It all comes down to this: the next driver to cross the finish will likely be the tournament champion. Deuce with a huge advantage on the pole for this final lap. He and Bubble Gunner quickly pull away, while Sir Ominous languishes behind Motor Toms. Deuce can taste that finish line, but Numbskull's right there. Around the final turn, and Deuce of Filipiak Performance Diecast is your Final Fantasy Fracas champion. And that's it, folks. The tournament is over. Following 19 months of competition, only 1 driver is left standing. Before we sign off for a much-needed break, we'd like to thank a few folks that went above and beyond with their support over the last 2 years. Of course, our sponsor, Rust Belt Customs, Monster Motorsports, who made the tournament logo, Spoolheads, who helped significantly improve the quality of racing, Junkyard Joust for donating some camera gear, Funky Mother Chicken Racing for being the funkiest, and Numbskull Racing for donating a bunch of 3D printed track pieces from Spoolheads. And of course, thank you to all the teams that participated: Tex 10 Racing, Grumpy Cloud Racing, 905 Diecast, White Knuckle Motoring, The A-Team, Fractal Panda Diecast Racing, Scotland 18, Dubious Diecast, Miniature Car Racing, Raw Sun God Racing, Live Young Diecast, Arlo Racing, Lily's Boneyard, Lightning Phoenix Racing, Uncle Jim's Janky Jalopies, Da Gold Dragon Racing, Bay City Diecast Racing, Big Al's Custom Diecast, Dogtown Racing, Lernectar Racing, Uncle Elvis Racing, Filipiak Performance Diecast, Flips Racing, Disaster DC, Nick Devers Racing, Vapor Racing, MQH Racing, Down Squad Racing, Ragtag Racing, G4 Diecast Racing, Dragon Wheels Racing, DRT3K, Blue Man Group, Golden Owl Racing, Puffs Racing, Beard Oil Motorsports, Wesley's Wheels, and Hot Nuts Diecast Racing. Check out redlinederby.com for information on our next event coming in February of 2025. Congratulations to Deuce and Filipiak Performance Diecast. This has been Jim D for Indiana Diecast Racing. Be sure to check in next time for more slightly above mediocre diecast racing. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.